Bringing the platen down so you can change the shaft seal, you simply go to hood height and bring it down to 0. As you do this, the platen's going to lower, and if you watch the shoulder bolts, you'll see if all of the weight is taken off. If all of the weight is taken off, then that's fine. If it's not, and your shoulder bolt still has this size gap, you can just put a little bit of cardboard under the platen, as we'll show you in the next clip, just to take the weight off, which makes it easier to remove the platen arm. With the grill turned off now, what we're going to do is just raise the platen arm and just slide a bit of cardboard in the middle point of the grill plate towards the back if needed. Lower it down, and as you lower it, you'll see we remove the weight from here. So we're a little bit far forward, so we're just going to move that cardboard further back. As we move it further back, you'll see the rear now takes the weight. With both bolts removed, you can pull the anti-rotate out, and that now exposes the pin. When you go to pull the pin, you'll notice that the switches get in the way. As you go to remove the clevis pin, you'll find the switches get in the way and stop it from being able to pull all the way out. To overcome this, you have to remove or loosen the bracket that holds in the upper and lower kill switches. So we start by loosening the top off most of the way, but not all of the way, and we fully remove the lower screw. With these removed, you can now see the switch bracket is loose and can push out of the way, which then enables us the access to get into the clevis pin and pull it clear. As such. At this point, the actuator is now separated from the lift shaft, and the lift shaft can be moved out. Normally you would lift it up, so we would pull up the shaft slightly, and then the actuator would rotate backwards. We can then lower the shaft to make it safe. The next section is to undo the 2 holding pins at the bottom. So you'll now need to take a screwdriver and just help ease the finger pins out. Once they're out, the actuator will be able to pull down and go out to the rear. But first, we've got to undo all of the cables. We'll need to first remove the encoder cable from the SIB, and then that'll need to be threaded back around all of the cable holding pins. Then we can undo the power supply to the motor of the actuator. With both these removed, the actuator can now be removed from the grille chassis. Now with the cables removed and unplugged, we can now remove the actuator. The trick to doing this is to push it back, and then as you push it back into the grille, you tilt it. You can now see the actuator sits up at an angle. Depending on where you're positioned, this will come straight out the back of the grille, but because we're on the side with the main power supply, we'll have to run this into the inside of the grille to remove it. When you've removed the actuator, you'll also note 2 small top hat washers or bushes. These must always be installed so they sit on the shaft of the actuator as such. If they're not installed, the actuator will have excessive play and then will not gap consistently. To reinstall the actuator, we go back in on the front and just watch that you have these bushes installed. We're going to pull that to the back of the grille and then align it with the slots. This can be quite challenging because it is quite a tight space. You must always watch as you do this that the seals do not drop off. If they do drop off, you need to make sure they're refitted before you slide it back in place. The best way is to angle it down, and as you angle it and pull it towards the back of the grille, it will then sit flat and drop in. If you try to do it at a 45-degree angle as we first tried, you'll notice that the gearbox protrudes too far and stops you going low enough to join the slots. With the actuator back in place, we now have to fit the slot pins which hold it in position and stop it from moving forwards. They first just drop down in a loose position and then you put in the bolt. With the nut and bolt loosely done up, I would now take a screwdriver and just tap so that's down in the down position. This ensures that the actuator is pulled back as far as it can and stops any movement during cooking or during operation. You can now continue to tighten up that nut and bolt, and then you have to do the same the other side. So now the actuator is back in and fastened at the bottom, we can now reconnect the shaft. So we've already put the shaft into the actuator. We're now just going to refit the pin. So sometimes this may need just a little bit of guidance, just if they don't line up properly. So the pin's now back in, and now we have to not forget to refix the brackets. So start by doing up the top screw. That'll bring in line the bottom screw, which saves you having to try and get into it from the side. Now whenever we change an actuator, it's important that we re-gap the grill. So with both of the switches tightened back up, the actuator pin back in place, we can now go back to reassembling the anti-rotate.